Chapter 5. The essential idea of Christianity as unfolded in the Johannean Gospel. The fundamental ideas of all possible religions, so far as they are expressed by an intellectual belief or creed, seem to be the common possession of mankind. The radical elements of all religious belief, the essential faith of the universal church, which is older than Christianity, appear to have become a part of the original dowry of the human soul, and to have been deeply impressed upon the spiritual nature of man. St. Augustine, under the mistake that Christianity is a creed, affirms that what is now called the Christian religion has existed among the ancients, and was not absent from the beginning of the race until Christ came in the flesh, from which time the true religion which existed already began to be called Christian. Religion has existed in all ages of the world, and always will exist as long as human nature remains the same. There is no absolutely new religion since the commencement of human history. There has been a singular pertinacity in the hold which the fundamental ideas of religion have had upon the human mind. In Christianity, we behold the highest exhibition of religious life and development of religious thought, which have sprung out of the nature of man according to the law of spiritual evolution. But it is not unreasonable to suppose that even Christianity itself may undergo a still higher development than the world has ever seen. Religion, as represented by TBC Church in past ages and by the Christian world of today, cannot be accepted as a finality. From the fruitful womb of the past will be born a still higher style of religious consciousness and spiritual life than the Church has ever realized in the brightest ages of its history. The following remarks of Max Muller in relation to religion as an intellectual belief seem to me eminently true and justified by the history of the human mind. The elements and roots of religion are seen as far back as we can trace the history of man. And the history of religion, like that of language, shows us a succession of new combinations of the same radical elements. An intuition of God, a sense of human weakness and dependence, a belief in a divine government of the world, a distinction between good and evil, and a hope of a better life. These are the radical elements of all religions. Though sometimes hidden, they rise again and again to the surface. Though frequently distorted, they tend again and again to their perfect form. An examination of all the great religions of the world will clearly show that the most vital articles of faith and rules of life are the common property and inheritance of mankind, and they must have come from a common source, a divine inspiration, a radiation from the living Word, the light of life, the eternal Logos. Even the Christ himself is more a principle than a person, not that we doubt the historic reality of his life, but we affirm that Ho was an embodiment of the Word, that found in him an organ of communication with mankind. And the Word is the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Justin Martyr, in his Apology, uses this language. One article of our faith then is that Christ is the first begotten of God, and we have already proved him to be the very Logos or universal source of light and reason, of which mankind are all partakers, and therefore those who lived according to the Logos are Christians, notwithstanding they may pass with you for atheists. The Logos, or Word, which is an emanation of the divine intellect to the receptive mind, is the primal source of all truth and the fountain of all mental illumination. Inspiration is not confined to the writers of the Old and New Testaments, but has been enjoyed by mankind in every age of the world, and in every clime where the life of an omnipresent God is felt. Clement of Alexandria goes so far as to affirm that it is clear that the same God to whom we owe the Old and New Testaments gave also to the Greeks their Greek philosophy, by which the Almighty is glorified or his thoughts made known among the Greeks. There is a sacred and divine element in all religions that ought to command our respect, for in no age of the world has man ever been sundered from the divine mind and the illuminating word that goes forth from him. There has been, and still is, a secret yearning of the soul after him who is the central point of our existence, and he has responded to this instinctive craving by giving life and light to men. As the sun pours its vitalizing beams into the flower that turns towards him, all souls, if they could express themselves in language, would say in the words of David, who speaks for us all, as the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsted for God, for the living God. Or, in the equally expressive language of one of the hymns of the Vedas, yearning for him, the far-seeing, my thoughts move onwards, as kind move to their pastures. Christianity, or the system of Christ, differs from all other religions in making the union of man with God a more practical reality and not a mere speculative hypothesis. In the Gospel of John, we'll have the best presentation of the ideas of Christ and the essential nature of Christianity. The preface, which exhibits the doctrine of the Logos, or Word, the light, and the life communicable directly to men's souls, is to be taken as the essence, the fixed standing ground of Jesus the Christ in all his discourses and teaching. It is the spirit, the innermost root, of the whole doctrine and philosophy of Jesus. The other Gospels contain a somewhat dry chronicle of the doings of the Christ. Especially is this true of the first and second, and of his conversations with the sensuous multitude, in which he brings down celestial truth veiled in parabolical representations, so that some spark of its heavenly fire might reach and animate their carnal minds. The Gospels of Matthew and Mark push the miracles of Jesus into prominence, which are of secondary importance. A miracle, in the ordinary theological use of the term, as an event outside of the ordinary laws of nature, can by no possibility be made to prove anything but itself. It is an isolated fact, standing alone, and having no fixed connection with the uniform mode of the divine procedure. A doctrine that requires a miracle to prove it is not true. There is a natural adaptation of the mind of man to the reception of all real truth. Spiritual truth requires no external evidence, nor does it admit of it. It shines by its own inherent, divine light. It is axiomatic or self-evident, for you can find nothing clearer than itself with which to construct an argument to prove it. It is very generally supposed that John had the writings of the other evangelists before him, and only designed to supply what they had omitted. It is thought to be the supplementary gospel. If that is the case, as Fichte has said, then in our opinion the supplement is the best part of the whole, and John's predecessors had passed over that precisely which was of essential importance. The conscious realization of a life in God, and not as a speculative thesis to be argued and disputed, is the fundamental thought in the system taught by the Christ, a union with God so complete in every department of our being that we can say, "The Father is in me, and I am in the Father, and I and my Father are one." A Christian pantheism which does not destroy the individuality of man, nor separate God from the universe which he continually creates out of himself, nor sunder him from the activities of the human soul by the intervention of second causes. The highest development of religious thought. An intuitive perception of the unity of the human with the divine existence is the highest attainable spiritual intelligence, and one which raises man above disease and the possibility of death. Before Jesus, this knowledge had nowhere existed, and through the dreary, dismal centuries of the history of the Church, it has been covered with a deep layer of externalism and well-nigh lost sight of. But a great original truth has a divine vitality in it, and cannot die, because it becomes a part of the life of God in the soul of man. Such was the conjunction of Jesus the Christ with the deity that a sympathetic union with him brings us into a receptive relation with the eternal God in his life. At every moment of time, he who is thus linked to the Godhead comes into a present possession of eternity and lives everlasting life. The life of Jesus has been viewed by the Christian world as an unattainable ideal of a perfect human development, after which we should strive, but with no hope of reaching the goal towards which we were to run, or of hitting the mark at which we are expected to aim. His character and activity are presented to us by the Church as an example having the force of a moral law, and yet we are told that they lie beyond the possibility of a full realization. This is thought to be especially so as to his union with God, his perfect conquest of evil, and his power over diseases of mind and body. In consequence of this view, the Church has come so far short of the true Christian standard, for men will make but a feeble, sickly effort, a mere pretense to exertion, in aiming at the impossible, and in seeking for what is deemed unattainable. But a slight glance at the teaching of the Christ will convince us how far this doctrine, which was at the same time the result as well as the cause of the spiritual poverty of the Church, was from the ideas of him who introduced Christianity into the world, not as a speculative metaphysical system, but as a practical religion and attainable state. To follow Christ, that is, to reproduce his life and experience, was made by him the essential condition of discipleship. Every true disciple or scholar was expected to be a repetition of the Master, and not a faint and unrecognizable imitation or caricature of him. Wherever Christ stood was one greater than the Temple of Solomon. So every human body was made to be a living temple of God, as was the personality of Jesus. That the union of God with Jesus is something unattainable by the soul of man is contradicted by the prayer of Christ, where he prays that all his disciples in every age might be one with God, as he and the Father were one. The works that he performed, which have been called miracles by an unauthorized substitution of a word of Latin origin for the Greek term employed in the Gospels, were to be repeated by his followers. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father. In proportion as a man is consciously united to God, he comes into conjunction with the central life and power of the universe, and a divine energy will burst forth from him and exhibit itself in works of healing the souls and bodies of men. An individual soul in a state of union with God, and with its natural powers augmented and reinforced by a conjunction with the central life, will expend its activity in doing the works of God, as naturally as water descends from a higher to a lower level. It is a belief that has been more or less current in the world that one person may be controlled by another, and the phenomena of animal magnetism has proved it. When a spirit out of the body takes possession of one in the flesh, it is called obsession. This has been witnessed in all ages of the world, and was common in the time of Jesus. But it is self-evident that we may be influenced by a good as well as by a bad spirit. The union of the soul with God as a practical reality is the central idea of Christianity. The true Christian is one who is obsessed of God, if we might be allowed to use the term in that sense, and he acts from an inward divine impulse in resisting evil and doing good. As Paul L. expresses it, he is strengthened with might by God's Spirit in the inner man, and is filled with all the fullness of God, and is thus strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Nearer, my God to thee, is the song that leads to a higher wisdom and to a power from above as surely as the Marseillaise hymn nerve the arm to victory in the struggle for freedom. Jesus introduced into the current of the world's thought, from which it had disappeared, the idea of the nearness of a higher realm of being which he calls the kingdom of the heavens, an orderly world of spirit life that is intermingled with this, and that acts and reacts upon it. That higher world does not merely border on this, it is everywhere present in this. It was one of the aims of the life of Jesus to bring the two realms of life, that are not separated by distance of space, into conscious contact. It was the keynote of his preaching. Know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. In the church, the moral force of this primitive Christine idea has been well nigh lost sight of, but will again be restored. An ever-present spiritual realm, with God as its central life, is being interfused with this world, as the light of the sun is mingled with the darkness at break of day. It is coming into available nearness to men's souls as a source of inspiration to a higher knowledge and nobler deeds. A religious or scientific system that leaves this out becomes like an ocean without water. In the mud at the bottom, the mind may find some intellectual treasures, but they are only relics from the wreck of higher truths. Materialism, in religion or science, can never satisfy the soul of man any more than the husks that the swine did eat could the belly of the prodigal son. The ancient Persian Magi and the Chaldeans, who represent the creed of an older civilization, believed, according to Cudworth, that there was a certain vital sympathy between the superior and lower orders of being. This is demonstrably true by psychometry. Communion with God involves communion with the angel world, for there is a common life that connects all existences in one chain of being. On this subject, Kant remarks, I confess I am much inclined to assert the existence of immaterial beings in this world, and to class my soul itself in the catalogue of these beings. We can imagine the possibility of the existence of immaterial beings without the fear of being refuted, though, at the same time, without the hope of being able to demonstrate their existence by reason. Such spiritual beings would exist in space, and the latter notwithstanding would remain penetrable for material beings, because their presence would imply an acting power in space, but not filling of it, i.e., a resistance called solidity. It is, therefore, as good as demonstrated, or it could easily be proved, if we were to enter into it at some length, or, better still, it will be proved in the future. I do not know where and when that also in this life the human soul stands in an indissoluble communion with all the immaterial beings of the spiritual world, that it produces effects in them, and in exchange receives impressions from them, without, however, becoming humanly conscious of them, so long as all stands well.